My parents gave my inheritance to my sister's husband while I sacrificed for years, so I took legal action and never looked back. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one holding my family together. It wasn't something I chose, it just happened. When my dad's back problems got worse, I picked up extra shifts. When mom's medications got too expensive, I cut my own grocery list to make it work. I became the quiet backbone of a house that always leaned a little too heavily on me. Lily, my younger sister, was the opposite. She was the golden child, the dreamer. My parents bragged about her art school, her travel plans, her creative mind. They never seemed to notice that I was barely sleeping, juggling 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. When Lily forgot to pay her student rent, Dad laughed and said, "She's got too much on her plate." When I missed one family dinner because of overtime, Mom sighed, "You never make time for us anymore." Still, I didn't resent them, at least, not fully. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that someday, when things calmed down, they'd see how much I'd given, that all those years of sacrifice would mean something. I held on to that belief like it was oxygen. My grandparents' inheritance was the quiet hope that kept me sane. Before he passed, Grandpa told me, "You've carried more than your share, son. That house will keep you safe one day." I never forgot those words. It wasn't about money, it was about fairness, a small sign that what I'd done for this family mattered. Now, looking back, I realize how naive that was. But back then, I believed loyalty had a balance sheet that if you gave enough love and recognition would come naturally. I had no idea that belief was about to be crushed in the cruelest way possible. My grandparents' house wasn't just an old building, it was the soul of our family. A small 2-story place with creaky wooden floors and the faint scent of my grandmother's lavender candles that never seemed to fade, even after she passed. Every corner carried memories. My grandfather reading the paper on the porch, Lily and I fighting over the last slice of pie, Mom humming while hanging laundry in the backyard. It was imperfect, but it was ours. After Grandpa's funeral, the lawyer sat us down and explained his will. The house and modest savings were to be split equally between Lily and me. It wasn't much, but hearing that gave me a sense of peace. "It's your safety net," Grandpa used to say, "so you'll never be without a home." Those words became my quiet motivation through every night shift and every unpaid vacation. Years passed, and I kept working, saving for bills, fixing broken pipes, repainting walls, mowing the lawn, always telling myself I was protecting what Grandpa left behind. Meanwhile, Lily's life looked like an Instagram highlight reel. Art exhibitions, spontaneous trips, expensive dinners she couldn't afford, but always seemed to manage. My parents would beam at her, saying things like, "She's chasing her dreams. You should be proud." I tried. I really did, but every time they said it, a tiny crack formed inside me. It wasn't jealousy, it was exhaustion. I'd been the one keeping everything running, yet somehow I was invisible in my own home. Still, I held on to that promise. That house symbolized more than inheritance. It was validation, proof that someday, when the time came, I'd finally be seen for everything I gave. But what I didn't know then was that the promise I clung to so tightly was already slipping away behind my back. It started subtly, the kind of changes you almost don't notice until they're too obvious to ignore. Lily began visiting more often, but not for sentimental reasons. She'd walk through the house with her husband, Tom, pointing at walls and muttering things like, "This could be opened up for more light," or "We could add French doors here." That word stuck to me like a splinter. Tom was slick, the kind of man who always had a confident grin and a firm handshake that felt just a little too performative. My parents adored him. Dad would sit for hours listening to his business ideas, nodding like Tom was some financial genius. Mom said he was a great influence on Lily. I stayed quiet, watching from the kitchen table, wondering when my family had started acting like our home was his playground one night. As I came home late from work, I heard laughter from the living room. Tom was there, joking with my dad. "Some people work themselves to death for pennies," he said, chuckling. "You've got to let money work for you." Dad laughed too, that deep, genuine laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. I froze in the hallway, realizing they weren't just talking about money, they were talking about me the next morning. Mom mentioned how Tom thought we could modernize the place and raise its value. He's just looking out for us, she said. Us. That word stung now, because I was starting to feel like I wasn't included in it anymore. Something in my gut told me this wasn't harmless talk. Still, I brushed it off, convincing myself family meant trust. But trust, I'd soon learn, is exactly what Tom was quietly taking from me. One casual conversation at a time, it was a Wednesday afternoon when everything fell apart. I was at work when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A calm, polite voice introduced himself as a lawyer representing my parents. At first, I thought something had happened to them. But then he said it. The property transfer has been completed. My stomach dropped. What transfer? I asked. The man hesitated before replying. The family home has been legally transferred to Thomas Walker, your brother-in-law. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. My brain went white noise. I drove home like a man possessed, barely remembering the turns. When I burst through the front door, my parents were sitting in the living room with Tom and Lily, sipping tea like nothing was wrong. I didn't even say hello, I just blurted, "Why is Tom's name on the deed?" Dad sighed, like I was being dramatic. "It's just a financial move, son. Tom's got experience in property investment. He's helping us handle things properly." I stared at him. "You gave him the house." Mom chimed in, her tone too soft, too rehearsed. "He's family, dear. He'll keep it safe. You've got your own life to build." Tom smirked. Not enough for them to notice, but enough for me to see it. That smug curve of his lips burned into my memory. "I'll make sure it's taken care of," he said. In that condescending tone he used when pretending to sound responsible, Lily avoided my eyes completely. That night, I sat in my old room, my childhood room, staring at the walls, realizing none of it was mine anymore. The house I'd fixed, protected, sacrificed for, was gone, signed away like I never existed. And for the first time in my life, I felt the one thing I never thought I would feel toward my own family: hate. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there replaying every sacrifice I'd ever made, every bill I paid, every dinner I skipped to work overtime, every time I told myself, "It's fine, they'll appreciate me one day." By sunrise, something inside me snapped. I walked straight into the kitchen where my parents were having breakfast, and before I could even think, the words spilled out. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, voice shaking but steady enough to make Mom look up from her plate. Dad frowned. "Do what, exactly?" "Give my inheritance, our family home, to Tom. You didn't even tell me." He sighed. That familiar tone of dismissal I'd grown up hearing. "You're overreacting. Tom's handling the paperwork because he knows these things better than you. It's still our home." I slammed my hand on the table. "No, it's his name on the deed. That means it's his house." Lily walked in, startled, her eyes darting between us. "Can we not do this right now?" She whispered. "Why not?" I said, glaring at her. "You stood there and watched them sign it away, didn't you?" She flinched, but stayed silent. Tom entered a second later, his usual calm smirk plastered on his face. "Hey, he said smoothly. "No need to get all emotional. It's just paperwork. We're family, remember." Something about the word family coming out of his mouth made me want to punch him. "Enough, both of you. We did what's best for everyone." "No," I said quietly. "You did what's best for him." I left before I said something I'd regret. But as I stepped outside, one thought echoed louder than my rage. If they could betray me this easily, what else were they hiding? For days, I walked around in a haze, part fury, part disbelief. Something about the whole transfer story didn't sit right. My parents weren't lawyers. They barely understood online banking, let alone legal deeds. And Tom? He was too smug, too certain. So I started digging. I went back to the old law firm that handled my grandparents' estate years ago. The receptionist looked confused when I mentioned my name, until an older man stepped out of his office. "You must be Daniel," he said, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather spoke highly of you." Hearing that almost broke me. When I asked about the inheritance, the lawyer frowned. "Strange," he said, pulling up the file. "According to the original will, the property was meant to be shared equally between you and your sister. No mention of your brother-in-law." My chest tightened. "Then how did it end up in his name?" He hesitated before handing me a copy of the new transfer documents. My signature was on it, except it wasn't mine. The handwriting was off, the date mismatched. I stared at it in silence, my pulse hammering in my ears. "This is a forgery," I muttered. The lawyer nodded grimly. "I can't say for certain who did it, but I can tell you this: someone filed this under your parents' authority with an attached statement saying you consented. That drive home was a blur. The betrayal I'd felt before was nothing compared to this. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was premeditated. When I confronted my parents that evening, they avoided eye contact. Tom wasn't even there, of course he wasn't. I looked straight at my father and said, 'You let him forge my name, didn't you?' He didn't answer, but the silence told me everything. That was the moment I realized my family hadn't just chosen Tom over me. They'd chosen to destroy me. The next morning, I walked into a law office with trembling hands and a folder full of betrayal. I wasn't a confrontational person. I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict, swallowing my anger to keep the peace. But something inside me had died the moment I saw that fake signature. Whatever loyalty I had left turned into cold determination. My attorney, Ms. Patel, was calm but firm. After reviewing the papers, she said, "You have a strong case. Forgery, misrepresentation, possible fraud. But suing your own parents, that's going to be brutal." I nodded, staring at the floor. They already chose their side. Within a week, the legal letters were sent out, a notice of dispute over the fraudulent property transfer. The response came just as fast. My parents were deeply hurt and claimed I was twisting things for money. Tom, ever the manipulator, started calling relatives, spreading his version of the story that I was greedy, ungrateful, trying to destroy the family legacy. My aunt called, her voice trembling. "Danny, please. They're old. Let it go. It's just a house." I wanted to scream. Just a house. It was my life, my grandfather's promise, everything I'd worked for. Weeks blurred into court filings, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I started recording every conversation, gathering every receipt, every text where my parents asked for help with repairs. Every memory turned into evidence. At home, the silence was unbearable. Mom stopped answering my messages. Lily sent one text. "Please don't do this. You'll regret it," I typed back. "I already regret trusting you." It was the first time I'd ever chosen myself over them. And as terrifying as it was, it felt like the only way forward, even if it meant burning every bridge I'd spent my life building. I've never imagined what isolation could really feel like until that lawsuit began. Overnight, I went from the dutiful son to the villain of every family story. Relatives stopped calling. Old friends from the neighborhood looked the other way. Even at work, I caught myself wondering if people could see the mess behind my eyes. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb. Mom left me a voicemail once. Her voice cracked halfway through. "You've always been so serious, Danny. Why are you doing this to us? We raised you better than this." Then a pause. "You're breaking your father's heart." She hung up before I could respond. I played that message 5 times, sitting alone in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of legal files. It hurt God. It hurt more than anything. But the pain wasn't from guilt. It was from knowing she still couldn't see what they'd done to me. Lily showed up at my door one evening, her eyes red. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I let her in. She paced around before blurting, "Tom didn't mean for things to go this far. He just wanted to help manage things, please. Drop the case before Dad gets sick from all this stress." I laughed bitterly. "He forged my name, Lily. That's not helping, that's theft." She bit her lip. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Families shouldn't take each other to court. Families shouldn't steal from each other," I said, cutting her off for a moment. She just stared at me like she didn't recognize the brother who used to protect her from everything. Then she whispered, "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "I've just stopped pretending." When she left, I realized the truth. I wasn't losing my family. They were losing me. The months that followed were the darkest I've ever lived through. The lawsuit dragged on. Each delay, another twist of the knife. My savings evaporated in legal fees, and sleep became a stranger. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, thinking about my parents sitting across from me in a courtroom, my own mother refusing to meet my eyes. Then came the worst blow. My lawyer called one morning, voice hesitant, "Daniel." The opposing counsel filed a motion to dismiss. They're claiming the documents can't be verified. The originals are missing. I just sat there staring at the wall. Missing? After all this? My one shot at justice was slipping through my fingers. A week later, I lost my job. My manager said I'd been distracted, and he wasn't wrong. I'd been living out of takeout boxes and anxiety for months. Bills piled up, and eviction notices weren't far behind. Meanwhile, Tom and Lily were posting pictures of their newly renovated home. Smiling in the living room, I'd painted myself. One night, I drove by the house. It looked different. The porch lights were brighter, the flowers replaced, the wooden door freshly varnished. My grandfather's wind chime, the one he built with his own hands, was gone. A stranger waved from the window. I pulled over down the street, gripping the steering wheel until my hands went numb. That was the moment it hit me. I hadn't just lost a home. I'd lost my place in the only family I'd ever known. I cried that night for the first time in years, not out of anger, but out of mourning. Because even if I won the case, I'd never get them back. Something unexpected happened. A message appeared in my inbox the next morning from someone I never thought I'd hear from again. The email was from Mrs. Alvarez, our old housekeeper. I hadn't seen her in years. The subject line read, "I think I can help you." My hands shook as I opened it. She wrote that she'd seen the fights between Tom and my parents over the documents. She remembered him bringing over a folder for signatures the same week the deed was changed. "I knew something was wrong," she said, "so I made copies before he left." Attached were scanned images of my grandfather's original will and a statement in her own handwriting describing what she witnessed. I called her immediately. "Mrs. Alvarez, you don't know what this means?" I said, barely holding it together. Her voice was calm but firm. "Your grandfather was a good man, Daniel. He'd want the truth to come out." I forwarded everything to Ms. Patel. Within days, she filed a motion to reopen the case. When Tom's lawyer saw the new evidence, he tried to delay proceedings, claiming the witness was unreliable, the copies inadmissible. But Ms. Patel was relentless. She subpoenaed old emails, bank records, and notary logs. Bit by bit, Tom's story started to unravel. I could almost feel the shift, the power dynamic turning. The man who'd smirked at me in my own living room was suddenly cornered. The court set a new hearing date. The night before it, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the scanned copy of my grandfather's signature. Steady, neat, familiar. I ran my fingers over the paper's edge like it could somehow reach back through time and give me strength. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed, hope. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for every part of myself they tried to erase. The courtroom was cold and sterile, but the tension inside it burned like fire. My parents sat on the opposite bench, avoiding my eyes. Lily clutched Tom's arm, her face pale. I tried to steady my breathing as Ms. Patel organized her notes beside me. She leaned over and whispered, "Stay calm. Truth doesn't need volume, just proof." Tom took the stand first. His confidence was almost theatrical. "Everything was done with full consent," he said smoothly. "Daniel knew about the transfer. We were all in agreement." His lawyer nodded approvingly, like they'd rehearsed it 100 times. Then Ms. Patel stood up. "Mr. Walker, can you explain why the notary listed on your version of the document wasn't licensed in the state at the time?" Tom blinked. "IA, that must be an error." She pressed on, voice raised. "And why did your bank account show a $15,000 withdrawal 2 days before that error occurred?" He started sweating. "That's irrelevant." "It's not," she said, holding up a printed statement, "because that same amount was deposited into your father-in-law's account the next day." The room went silent. My father's face turned ghost white. My mother covered her mouth. "Ms. Patel motioned to the back of the courtroom. "We also have a statement from a witness who saw you coercing the family to sign documents they didn't understand." Mrs. Alvarez rose from her seat, calm, unwavering. Tom's expression cracked completely. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Walker, you committed fraud. The property is to be returned to its rightful heirs immediately." Lily burst into tears. Tom stood frozen, eyes darting between the judge and my family like the walls were closing in. When the gavel struck, I didn't feel joy, just an aching relief. After months of pain, gaslighting, and silence, the truth finally spoke louder than all their lies. But even victory came with a cost I could never undo. After the verdict, I didn't go home right away. The courthouse steps felt like neutral ground, a place between the life I'd lost and the one I was about to build. Lily tried to speak to me as we exited, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Tom was being escorted out by his lawyer, his face drained of the smugness that used to define him. My parents stood there, hollow and silent, like strangers who'd just realized what their loyalty had cost them. In the weeks that followed, I signed the final documents confirming the house was back in my name, or rather, our name, as my grandfather had intended. But I didn't move back in. Too many ghosts lingered in those walls, not the comforting kind, but the kind that whispered betrayal through the cracks. I sold it quietly and used the money to buy a small home 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, just peaceful. Some nights, I'd sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and think about how strange it felt to have no one left to answer to. No phone calls, no guilt, no manipulation, just quiet. And maybe that's what healing really is, learning to live with the silence that follows the storm. One afternoon, while unpacking, I found an old photo, me and Grandpa on the porch, both smiling, covered in paint from fixing the fence. I traced his handwriting on the back. Family means doing right, not being right. I smiled through tears, because for the first time, I finally understood what he meant. I didn't win back a house. I won back myself. The boy who used to believe loyalty was enough had finally learned that sometimes love has to end for self-respect to begin.